I remember the day that led me here, to this cold, sterile hospital bed, like it was yesterday. It feels surreal, almost as if I'm recounting someone else's tragedy. But this is my story, one I never imagined would unfold this way. 5 days in the hospital, and every minute feels stretched, each second a reminder of the moment my world imploded. All because of my young wife, Emma, and the secrets she kept from me. Emma and I had been married for 3 years, and though we had an age gap, I had always believed we shared a bond that transcended it. She had this way of lighting up a room, her laughter infectious, her presence captivating. I thought I was lucky. Little did I know how blind I was to the reality lurking beneath her sweet exterior. The first sign something was amiss came subtly, barely noticeable at first. Emma's phone would buzz late into the night, messages she would glance at, smile faintly, and then tuck away. I told myself it was nothing, a group chat, perhaps, or a friend. She had a vibrant social life, and I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. Still, a gnawing doubt settled in, a prickling unease that I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. I ignored it until that night. It was just a week ago. I came home early, hoping to surprise her, maybe whisk her away for a spontaneous dinner. The house was quiet when I entered, darker than usual, and I assumed she was out. But then, I heard voices from upstairs, Emma's laughter, soft and intimate, followed by a lower, unfamiliar voice. My heart thundered in my chest, a sound so loud it drowned out my thoughts. I crept up the stairs, the walls seeming to close in around me. When I reached our bedroom door, I froze, my hand inches from the doorknob. Part of me wanted to turn and leave, to walk away from the truth that awaited me on the other side. But I couldn't. I had to know. Taking a breath, I pushed the door open, my mind unprepared for the scene before me. There she was, Emma, wrapped in the arms of another man, a stranger, younger, with a smug expression as he looked at me, unflinching. Emma's face went blank as she saw me, her lips parting in surprise, but not an ounce of shame colored her features. For a second, I wondered if she'd even feel guilty if I hadn't walked in. My world fractured in that moment, pieces of my trust and love for her crumbling to the floor. The confrontation that followed was chaotic, blurred in my memory, but every word she uttered still echoes in my mind, haunting me as I lay here. She didn't apologize, didn't even try to deny what I'd seen. Instead, her words dripped with indifference, as if my presence was nothing but a slight inconvenience. "What are you doing here so early?" she had asked, her tone void of remorse. That question, a simple, casual inquiry, shattered me. I wanted to scream, to throw the stranger out, to demand answers from her, to make sense of the betrayal. But all I could do was stand there, fists clenched, paralyzed by the absurdity of it all. Then, the stranger, his confidence as brazen as her indifference, smirked, looking me dead in the eyes before dismissing me, as though I was the intruder in my own marriage. Rage boiled within me, blinding, consuming every rational thought. I don't remember much of what happened next, just flashes of us grappling, fists flying, furniture crashing. All I recall is the anger, raw and unforgiving, surging through me as I fought to reclaim a semblance of dignity. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the floor, my head throbbing, vision blurring as I slipped in and out of consciousness. Emma's voice filtered through the haze, panicked and desperate, not for me but for the stranger beside her, urging him to leave before the police arrived. My own wife, watching me crumble, torn apart by her infidelity, yet choosing to shield the man she had chosen to betray me with. When I woke up, I was here, in the hospital, surrounded by the sterile, indifferent walls that mirrored the emptiness I felt inside. Emma hadn't visited, hadn't called, hadn't even checked in on me. In the end, she'd left me behind, her betrayal complete. I try to piece together the fragments of my life, to make sense of the past few days as I lie here in bed. Nurses come and go, the doctors speak in hushed tones about my injuries, about the healing process, but none of that feels real. What feels real is the ache in my chest, the sense of betrayal that pulses with every heartbeat. Lying here, I reflect on the signs I missed, the moments that slipped by unnoticed, the subtle shifts in her behavior that I dismissed. All the late nights she claimed to be working, the sudden disinterest in our conversations, her growing preoccupation with her phone, everything was laid bare before me now, a cruel puzzle I should have solved sooner. It's as if I'm reliving our marriage in reverse, tracing each memory to find the exact moment where I lost her. But it's pointless. She had made her choice, and now I'm left to pick up the pieces of a life I thought was solid. Lying in that hospital bed, I felt a hollow ache spread through me. It was a bitter blend of hurt and anger that kept churning in my mind, repeating one question: had Emma ever really loved me? As that question echoed, another, darker thought surfaced, one I hadn't wanted to entertain. Had she stayed with me only for my money? It was a thought I'd have dismissed as ridiculous if anyone else had suggested it. But here I was, recalling every red flag, every suspicious moment, and every distant glance she'd given me in recent months. My eyes drifted to the 4-drip beside me, the slow tick of the heart monitor the only sound in the room. Emma hadn't visited, not once, in the 5 days since I'd been admitted. I had to face the truth: she didn't care. As I lay there, a plan formed in my mind. A call, just one, to make things crystal clear, to remind her that I was done. If she wanted the life she'd chosen, she could have it, but she wouldn't be doing it under my roof anymore. With some effort, I reached for my phone on the side table, my fingers shaking slightly as I scrolled through my contacts to her name. I couldn't remember the last time I'd hesitated to call her. The phone rang, each buzz somehow longer and more drawn out than the last. I half expected her not to answer, to ignore me like she'd ignored the fact that I was here, lying in a hospital bed. But then, after the 5th ring, her voice came through, light and casual as if nothing had happened. "Hello?" Hearing her voice made my jaw tighten. I fought to keep my tone even, reminding myself that this conversation had to remain calm if I wanted her to understand what I was about to do. "Emma," I began, struggling to control the bitterness in my voice. "You left your keys with me at the hospital. I'll be leaving them here for you." There was a pause, and I could almost feel her confusion through the silence. "My keys?" she repeated, sounding distracted. "Why would you need my keys? You're coming home soon, aren't you?" I scoffed, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Coming home? I think you misunderstand me, Emma." I took a slow breath, letting the word settle. "I'm not coming back. You, however, are free to pick up your things whenever you like. The keys are here with me at the hospital. It's time you packed up and found somewhere else to live." There was a shift in her tone, one that surprised me. "Jack, what are you talking about? You're overreacting. Look, we had a rough patch. People go through things like this. You need to stop making it so dramatic." The word dramatic stung, sparking a flash of anger. My voice dropped, low and cold. "Dramatic? You call this dramatic? Walking in on you with another man in our home, the home I thought we shared with love, and you think I'm overreacting?" "Jack," she sighed, almost as if she were speaking to a child. "You have to understand. People change. Sometimes feelings evolve. That doesn't mean you can just kick me out like this. We've shared so much, surely that must mean something to you. What we shared meant everything to me, Emma, until you threw it away." My hands clenched around the phone, my knuckles white as I tried to rein in the storm of emotions building up. "I trusted you. I was blindly loyal to you. And you," I broke off, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of hearing how broken I was. "The fact that you think this can be swept under the rug tells me everything I need to know." There was silence on the other end, the quiet thick and heavy. For a moment, I thought she'd hung up, but then she spoke, her tone cautious. "Look, Jack. I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but you're not perfect either. You think you can just erase me from your life, and that'll solve everything?" Her attempt to turn the tables, to blame me in any way for what she'd done, was almost laughable. "Don't try that," I replied sharply. "You made this choice, Emma, not me. If you were looking for an excuse to leave, you should have just said so instead of sneaking around behind my back." I took a steadying breath, realizing I was done with this, with her, with every manipulation. Consider this my final decision. The keys are here, and you should be gone by the time I get home. The line went silent again, her shock apparent even over the phone. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack, where will I go? I have nowhere else. The sadness in her voice was an odd contradiction to the cold indifference she'd shown only moments ago. But I was numb to it, unmoved. I wasn't going to be swayed by her pleas. Not anymore. That's not my concern, Emma. You should have thought about that before you brought someone else into our bed, before you decided that your needs came before our marriage. For a moment, I thought I heard her sniffle, a small sound that could have been a sign of remorse or merely an attempt at pity. But I couldn't bring myself to care. I'd wasted enough emotions, enough trust, on her. Without another word, I ended the call, staring at the blank screen in my hand. The relief I expected didn't come. Instead, there was a strange emptiness, a hollow space where love and trust had once resided. I let my head fall back against the hospital pillow, exhaustion sweeping over me as I considered the gravity of what I had just done. Our life together was over, and I didn't know if I'd ever be able to fill that void. But one thing was certain, Emma was out of my life, and this was the beginning of whatever came next. After I hung up, the silence around me felt even thicker, almost suffocating. For the first time in years, I was truly alone. The hospital walls closed in, white and unfeeling, a harsh contrast to the home I had once shared with Emma, which was now just a shell of memories and broken promises. I tried to process everything that had happened in the past week, to make sense of the whirlwind of betrayal and heartbreak. But all I felt was a gnawing emptiness, a hollowness that nothing seemed to fill. Emma's last words echoed in my head, where will I go? She had said it as though I owed her something, as if she hadn't been the one to shatter everything we'd built together. Part of me wondered if I should feel guilty, if perhaps I had been too harsh. But then, the memory of that night, the cold look in her eyes, the stranger's smug grin as he lay in our bed, flashed in my mind, and any pity I felt for her vanished. The following days passed in a blur. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, adjusting my foredrip, speaking to me in that soft, sympathetic tone reserved for people going through something they can't quite fathom. Each time they asked how I was feeling, I wanted to say something, to unload the storm inside me. But I just nodded, saying I was fine, even though fine was the furthest thing from the truth. On the 5th day, the doctor came in with the good news, I was clear to go home. The thought of returning to that house filled me with dread. It wasn't just the place itself, it was the memories that clung to it, the echoes of laughter, of shared secrets, of dreams that now felt like cruel lies. But it was my home, and I wasn't going to let her betrayal taint it any longer. She was gone now, and I had to find a way to reclaim what was left of my life. When I stepped through the front door, the house felt eerily silent, like a space caught in limbo, waiting for something to bring it back to life. Her presence, or lack of it, was everywhere. The living room, where we'd spent countless nights together, felt foreign, as though the shadows of our past lingered in every corner. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I walked through each room, checking to see if she had taken anything with her, if she had left any trace of the life we'd once shared. In the bedroom, a wave of emotion hit me. The bed, once a place of comfort, now seemed like a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. My mind drifted back to that night, to the cold look on her face, her voice calm and casual as she dismissed my hurt. I was supposed to feel anger, rage even, but all I felt was a deep, gnawing sorrow, like something precious had been stolen from me, something I'd never get back. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I spotted a small box tucked under the nightstand. Curiosity got the better of me, and I reached for it, half expecting it to be something trivial. But when I opened it, my breath caught. Inside were old photos of us, snapshots of moments that now felt like someone else's memories. There was a picture of our wedding day, Emma's face beaming, her eyes full of love, or what I thought was love. There were pictures of vacations, of late nights out with friends, and of quiet moments at home. Each photo told a story of a life that seemed so real, so vivid, but now felt like a lie. I couldn't look at them anymore. I closed the box, my hands trembling as I placed it back on the nightstand. Standing up, I looked around the room, realizing that everything in this house held a memory, a reminder of what once was. I didn't want to throw it all away, but I couldn't bear to live in a museum of memories either. The days that followed were filled with tasks I'd once taken for granted. I threw myself into cleaning, into rearranging the furniture, changing every little thing I could to make it feel like my own again. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, but it was the only way I knew to start moving forward. Every night, I collapsed into bed, too tired to think, too numb to feel anything except a hollow ache in my chest. One evening, as I was sorting through some of Emma's things that she'd left behind, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and my heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Emma. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Jack, I know I hurt you," the message read. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but please understand, it wasn't just about you. I was lost. I'm sorry." For a moment, I felt a flicker of something, a part of me that wanted to respond, to ask why, to try and make sense of her actions. But as I reread her words, I realized they didn't change anything. She was trying to justify something that was beyond justification, to excuse a betrayal that had left scars I wasn't sure would ever heal. With a steady hand, I deleted the message and blocked her number, cutting off the last thread that connected us. In the weeks that followed, life moved on, slowly and quietly. Friends reached out, offering support, their words kind but unable to reach the depths of my grief. I went back to work, trying to lose myself in the routine, but every now and then, a wave of sadness would hit me, bringing me back to that night, to the heartbreak I was still trying to escape. One night, as I sat alone in the living room, the house finally silent, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't happiness, not by any means, but it was peace, an acceptance of what had happened, of the betrayal, and of the life I was now left to rebuild. I knew I wasn't fully healed, that there would be days when the pain would return, fresh and sharp. But I also knew that this was the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, to find a life that wasn't defined by her choices, but by my own. As I looked around the room, I realized that the house no longer felt like a monument to our past. It was just a place, a blank canvas waiting for a new story. And for the first time since that night, I felt a glimmer of hope, a faint light in the darkness, a reminder that life goes on, and that maybe, just maybe, I could too. The day I decided to get rid of the bed was colder than usual, with the first hint of autumn creeping into the air. It had been weeks since Emma's betrayal, but the bed, a silent witness to the night I walked in on her and that stranger, was a constant reminder, taunting me every time I walked past the room. I couldn't live with it any longer. If I was going to rebuild my life, piece by piece, I had to start with the small things. So I called a service to haul it away, feeling an odd sense of satisfaction watching it go, as though I was shedding a layer of my past. The next day, I decided to go out and buy a new one. It felt symbolic somehow, like taking back control over something that had once brought me nothing but comfort. I got in the car and drove to a nearby furniture store, a place I'd passed countless times but had never had a reason to enter until now. The smell of new leather and polished wood greeted me as I stepped inside, a quiet reminder that life was going on. The store was spacious, with rows upon rows of furniture displays set up like miniature rooms. I wandered through the aisles, glancing at various bed frames, headboards, and mattresses. I wanted something different from what Emma and I had shared, something new, fresh, a piece that symbolized a clean break. Then, just as I turned a corner, I froze. At the far end of the showroom, chatting animatedly with a couple, stood Emma. My Emma, or rather, the woman who used to be mine. She wore a store uniform, her hair tied back in a sleek ponytail, her face composed in a polite, professional smile that made her look almost strange. Seeing her there, out of context, felt like some surreal, twisted joke. I wanted to look away, to turn and leave, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. My heart pounded in my chest as a whirlwind of emotions rushed over me. Emma glanced in my direction, and for a moment, she looked right through me. But then, her eyes widened in shock as recognition dawned. Her smile faltered, and her face went pale. She looked as stunned as I felt. I could have walked away. I should have. But something inside me urged me forward, a need for closure or maybe even an answer, though I wasn't sure what question I'd been asking. I walked toward her, my steps heavy, my gaze locked onto hers. "Jack," she murmured as I approached, her voice barely a whisper, just loud enough for me to hear. She looked around nervously, as if she wanted to ensure that no one else in the store would overhear our conversation. "Emma," I replied, my tone flat. I wasn't here for theatrics, for scenes, or public displays. I just wanted to buy a bed and leave. But here she was, standing before me, looking like she hadn't expected to see me again either. For a moment, we just stood there, two people with a history that had soured into bitterness and pain. She cleared her throat, her eyes darting away from mine as she seemed to search for something to say. I didn't think I'd run into you here," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know you worked here," I replied, keeping my tone as even as I could. "I came here to buy a new bed." I watched her swallow hard, her gaze flickering with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was shame, or maybe it was just discomfort. She knew as well as I did why I was getting rid of the old bed. Emma forced a smile, attempting to recover some of her composure. "Well, if you need any help, I can show you around." It felt strange hearing her offer, like a cold irony hanging between us. Once, she had been the person I would go to for advice, for comfort, for everything. Now, her offer sounded almost absurd. "I think I'll manage," I replied, my voice low but steady. I moved past her, determined to get what I came for without looking back. But as I walked through the rows of mattresses, I felt her presence behind me, her shadow trailing me like a haunting echo. I tried to ignore her, focusing on the task at hand, examining the beds with a careful eye. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I found a frame I liked, something simple, dark wood, nothing extravagant, but sturdy, dependable. It felt like the exact opposite of what Emma had represented in my life. Just as I was about to call over another salesperson, Emma approached, standing just a few feet away, watching me in silence. Her gaze lingered on the bed I'd chosen, and I could feel her discomfort, almost as if she understood the symbolism behind it. "Jack," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you like this. I lost myself somewhere along the way." Hearing her say it, hearing the words spill out of her mouth, didn't give me the closure I thought it would. There was no satisfaction, no vindication, just a hollow feeling that deepened the ache I'd felt since that night. I looked at her, and for the first time, she seemed small, unsure, a shadow of the woman I'd once known. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Emma, maybe you did lose yourself. But that doesn't excuse what you did. You made choices, and I was the one who had to deal with the fallout. It's over now." She looked down, her hands wringing together as though she was grasping for something to hold on to. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I wanted you to know that I really am sorry." I nodded, feeling an odd sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite, but maybe it was something close to it, a quiet acceptance of the reality I'd been dealt. I didn't need anything from her anymore. I didn't need explanations or apologies or promises that things could have been different. What was done was done. I signaled to another salesperson, and without another glance at Emma, finalized my purchase. As I walked out of the store, the bed arranged for delivery, I felt lighter somehow, as though a weight had been lifted. Emma was part of my past, but she was no longer part of my future. The next day, when the delivery truck arrived and the new bed was set up in my room, I stood back and looked at it, feeling a strange sense of accomplishment. This was a new beginning, a fresh start, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The ghost of Emma, of that betrayal, no longer haunted my home. I climbed onto the new bed that night, lying down on the fresh mattress, letting the quiet settle around me. There was no more anger, no more bitterness, only peace. And as I closed my eyes, I realized that for the first time since that night, I was ready to move forward, to start over, to reclaim my life on my own terms. The night felt still, a peaceful silence wrapping around me in the darkness. For the first time since Emma had shattered our marriage, I finally felt a sense of closure. I lay in my new bed, staring up at the ceiling, feeling the faint ache of exhaustion, the kind that signals a person has finally reached the end of an ordeal. Just as I was about to drift off, my phone lit up beside me, its screen casting a small glow in the dark. I glanced at it, expecting nothing of importance. But there it was, Emma. Her name on the screen brought an immediate wave of resentment, and my jaw tightened reflexively. The urge to ignore the call, to silence the phone and shut her out, was overwhelming. But something tugged at me, a morbid curiosity, maybe, or just a need to see what she had to say after everything. I took a breath and answered, holding the phone to my ear without a word. For a moment, I only heard the quiet sound of her breathing on the other end, as if she were waiting for some signal from me. Then, her voice cracked, filled with the kind of desperation I hadn't heard from her before. "Jack," she whispered, barely getting the words out. "I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm so sorry. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I don't know how to make it right." She paused, her voice breaking with a quiet sob. "I don't even know why I did it. I lost myself, Jack." I closed my eyes, the words washing over me like hollow echoes. Part of me wanted to hang up, to spare myself the theatrics of her remorse, but a deeper, darker part wanted to hear her out, to see what she'd say next. "Jack, please," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "Please forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I can't live like this. I can't. I need you to understand that I'm sorry, that I'll do anything to fix this. Please, just give me one more chance." I let her words linger in the silence, my grip on the phone tightening. I'd thought hearing her beg for forgiveness would bring me some kind of satisfaction, but instead, all I felt was emptiness. Her words were meaningless, a weak attempt to patch up the gaping wounds she'd left behind. "Where's your stranger, Emma?" I asked, my voice calm, steady, but cold. "Why don't you call him and cry to him? Beg him to fix what you broke?" She inhaled sharply, the sound a mix of shock and heartbreak. "Jack, it's not like that. I don't even talk to him anymore. He doesn't matter, he never mattered." I let out a bitter laugh. "He mattered enough for you to throw away everything we had, didn't he? Funny how easy it is to say he doesn't matter now that you're alone." Her silence told me everything. She had nothing to say, no argument to make, no way to refute the truth. She had chosen her path, and now she had to live with the consequences. "Emma," I said, my tone final, unyielding, "I'm done. Whatever you think you need from me, I don't have it to give. You destroyed what we had. Now you have to deal with that. It's not my job to pick up the pieces." She started sobbing on the other end, her words coming out in broken fragments, pleas for a second chance, for forgiveness, for anything that would let her undo what she'd done. But it was too late, far too late for her apologies, her tears, or her regret. Without another word, I ended the call. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me as I opened my contacts and blocked her number. Then, I opened every messaging app we'd used, every point of contact she had, and blocked her there too. It was final now. She was out of my life, and I wasn't leaving any way for her to claw her way back in. As I set the phone down, a fleeting thought crossed my mind, a worry that, despite the blocks and barriers, she might show up here, pounding on the door, desperate and pleading. But even if she did, I knew I wouldn't let her in. I had nothing left to say, no reason to listen to her excuses or her cries for forgiveness.